So this is going to be the second part of Chapter 13 review, which is going to be on workers' compensation and disability because they're very similar. So we'll start with workers' compensation. So workers' compensation is a bit like insurance in that, whoop, my bad. So again, just as I was talking about here, when somebody's injured, it's usually dealt with either via workers' compensation or disability. So workers' compensation is usually for short-term injuries that you're going to be healed from after a certain amount of time that you suffered for on the job. And then disability is usually for longer term things where you might not be able to come back to work or might not be able to work because of an injury you suffered at work. So again, both these take into effect when you suffer an injury at work, not on your own time, obviously. So, workers' compensation is kind of like an insurance policy that kind of companies pay for. That again, they have in reserve that they can pay out to any employees that get injured. So again, it's kind of like taking insurance on your employees, or kind of like liability insurance. So if somebody gets injured, again, you'll have this store of money that you can access because you've been paying for it to pay out those workers' compensation claims. So the general formula for workers' compensation is that the premium the businesses pay, so again, the company is going to pay a premium that is based on the base rate of their job, which is usually set by state standards, times the total payroll that they have divided by 100. This dividing by 100 is basically in a sense of it's the entire premium they pay is based off of every $100 they spend on their employees. So it's kind of a weird thing to get into, but just know that it's actually the total payroll divided by 100, not just the total payroll. Technically, you could write it if you really want to. You could write it as base rate. Let me do something other than the red here. There we go. So you could write it. There we go. Come on. There we go. You could write it as base rate divided by 100 times payroll. Times payroll. This is essentially equivalent because, again, it really doesn't matter which one of these you divide by 100 as long as you divide one of them by 100. Because, again, the premium is based off of every $100 you spend on employees. So, a cave digging company has a base rate of $22 per $100 paid to employees. If the total payroll is $400,000, what is their workers' compensation premium? So, the base rate here is 22, so we're going to take 22 times, again, their total payroll is $400,000, and we're going to divide that by 100 to figure out how many hundreds of dollars they spend, and you just multiply that out. So 22 times 400,000, that has been divided by 100, and you end up with about $88,000. 88,000. And this is a yearly amount here. So again, it's not like 88,000 a month, but 88,000 a year. Which again is not necessarily unreasonable for a job that has a high degree of risk. So obviously, if you're digging caves or working in a coal mine or something like that, the risk of injury to you is much greater than if you're working at a barista store or whatnot. So it's not unusual for companies that are very labor intensive or very dangerous to have a very high workers' compensation premium. Comparatively, like a shoe store might only have a base rate of $6 because again, you're not really that likely to get injured at a shoe store. So you do the same calculation, but it'd be 6 times 180,000 divided by 100. Also notice that the payroll here is quite a bit less as well because again, the fewer employees you have, the less workers' compensation you have to pay. So the way that is kind of taken care of in the formula, this would be 10,800 by the way, is again, the lower your payroll is and the lower your base rate is, that means the lower workers' compensation you have to pay. Because like again, if you don't have that many employees, obviously you don't need to pay that much workers' compensation because you have fewer people that could possibly get injured. So it's all kind of taken care of in this formula here. Also, if your employees aren't really paid that much, then workers' compensation shouldn't be that much either because they're not really losing out on that much money. So again, the lower you pay people, the less people you have, and the lower your base rate is, all that's going to lower is your workers' compensation. Obviously, you want to pay people a fair wage and whatnot because obviously if you don't do that, they're not going to want to work for you anyway. But those are all factors in this formula. Disability is something for a little bit more serious. So disability insurance is usually either provided by the company or by somebody else's private disability insurance if you have that. Again, just depends on who you are and who you work for. But that's usually used when you are suffering an injury that you cannot come back to work for. So you're permanently disabled, you can no longer work because of the injury you suffered at work, and therefore you're entitled to certain benefits either on an annual or a monthly basis. So the way you get the annual disability benefits is you take the years that you've worked plus your expected retirement age minus your present age. Basically, this right here, this chunk, can be represented as years you would have worked. Have worked. So basically, you take the years you have worked already plus the years you would have worked before you retired, and then you times it by your rate and you times it by your final average salary. This is usually a rate that's set by your either company if they have their own private disability insurance, or your own disability insurance if you decide to get one on your own. And then the final average salary simply means they take your last, usually like 5 years of work, and average out the salary for those last 5 years, and that's what they use as your base amount. So this right here, again, sometimes you're given the expected retirement age and the present age. Sometimes you're just simply said, okay, they worked for 10 years and they would have worked for 20 more years. And then for you have that value there right away. So sometimes you need to do the subtraction, sometimes you don't. Just depends on the information that they give you. So for instance, we have a factory worker here. Their final average salary was $38,000. They worked for 15 years already, and they would have worked for 12 more years until they retired. And so it says their rate of benefits is 8%. What would be their annual and monthly benefits? Well, okay, let's start this formula here. So first off, the years they have already worked. So they've already worked 15 years. And then again, going back here, we have this expected retirement minus present age. But we just simply say here that they would have worked for 12 more years. So rather than doing expected retirement minus present age, we're just going to add in 12 because that's how many years they would have worked. Basically, it's the same. They had 12 more years before their retirement age, which is what that subtraction does. So in this case, we don't have to do the subtraction because we don't have their retirement age and their present age. We just simply have how many more years would they have worked. In this case, 12. Times by 0.08 because that's their disability rate, and times by 3,800 because that's their final average salary. And so you put all this together here, 15 plus 12 is 27 times 0.08 times 38,000, and that will give them a total final salary of 82,080 bucks a year. So this is for a yearly payment, right? $82,000 and 80 bucks. So making sure I did my calculations right here. So give me 1 second. 27 times 0.08 times 38,000. Yeah. So if I wanted their monthly benefits, what I would do is I would take this $82,000 or $82,080 and divide it by 12 because that's how much they get for a year. If I want to get how much they get for a month, again, just divide that by 12 and you get 6840, right? So once again, you simply want to read the question carefully and decide what of the what calculations you essentially have. Do you have, go back here, do you have their retirement age and their present age, or do you simply just have how many more years they would have worked? Because either one can be used in the formula to whatever effect there. So. And then I believe, yeah, that's it for this one. So again, this was kind of a short one because workers' compensation and disability really don't have that many complex calculations with them. It's mainly just, like I said, this formula right here, and then that formula right there for workers' compensation. So once again, let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, hopefully this video helped you out. Have a good day.